Disclaimer, disclaimer, disclaimer. Imagine for a moment that this is your last day on Earth. Truly picture it. And immediately you are confronted with a wave of past regrets and a tremendous ambition to finish this day as fully as you can imagine it. To connect with loved ones or accomplish a last great act of self-expression. Now forget all that untimely looming doom and imagine instead that this is your first day on Earth. How do you want to live? How will you plan your passions and priorities for a promising long future ahead? And what do you most want to learn of this world? In order to get your first day started off right, we offer a buffet of new things to learn about here on This Week in Science. Coming up next.
I've got the kind of mind that can't get enough. I want to learn everything. I want to fill it all up with new discoveries that happen every day of the week. There's only one place to go to find the knowledge I seek. I want to know what's happening. What's happening? What's happening this week in science? What's happening? What's happening? What's happening this week in science?
Good science to you, Blair.
Good science and happy Thursday to you, Justin.
Woohoo! We have got, this is an amazing, we're Kiki-less again, if you haven't noticed. It is the Justin and Blair This Week in Science version. We've got there's so many amazing stories again this week in science. I almost couldn't choose. There were so many. Like normally there's like, okay, here's a couple of good ones and there's a couple that might not make it. This week is jam-packed. So I'm going to be speaking really quickly throughout the show, trying to get all of this in here.
What did you bring?
I've got some amazing stories on viruses, bacteria, a hidden super vitamin that's been there all along, but we just didn't know. And there's some interesting stuff from the bonobo camp. The wonderful bonobo has been decombobulated through its DNA. We've got a better picture of it now than we had before, and it's revealing some pretty interesting stuff about human origin.
That's so cool. I love viruses.
What'd you bring?
I brought a story about what makes a good dad in honor of Father's Day on Sunday. Story about bats and rabies. The latest use of cane toad poison and a courage pill.
Oh, courage pill. In pill form. That's interesting. Yes. I always thought courage came in a bottle, but that's... And actually, the story I'd like to lead off with was none of those that we've blurbed. This is a really fascinating thing because I'm totally caught up in the whole human origins thing. I think this is all really super exciting stuff. They did some uranium dating, which has nothing to do with going out with somebody who's radioactive, but this is uranium dating that revealed Iberian art to be the world's first conceptual abstractionism. So what they're doing is they're pushing back the earliest known practice of cave art in Europe by about 10,000 years, indicating the paintings were created either by the first modern humans in Europe or perhaps by artistically inclined Neanderthals. So it's 50 paintings in 11 caves in northern Spain, and including the UNESCO World Heritage Sites. They were dated by a team of UK, Spanish, and Portuguese researchers led by Dr. Alistair Pike of the University of Bristol. So the traditional methods of dating, radiocarbon dating, don't work where there's no organic pigment. So the team instead, this is pretty ingenious, so the team instead dated the formations of tiny stalactites on top of the paintings using radioactive decay of uranium. This gives a minimum age for the art. Where larger stalagmites had been painted, maximum ages were also obtained. So it gave a top and bottom range, right? Hand stencils, discs made by blowing paint onto the wall of the El Castillo cave were found to date back to at least 40,800 years. That's the bottom. Making them the oldest known cave art in Europe 5 to 10,000 years older than the previous examples found in France. A large club-shaped symbol in the famous polychrome chamber at Altamira was found to be at least 35,600 years old. That's, again, at least 35,600 years old, indicating that the painting started there 10,000 years earlier than previously thought. And pretty amazingly, that the cave was revisited and painted a number of times over a period spanning more than 20,000 years. You think we have traditions today? Oh my goodness. A 20,000-year tradition of doing cave art in this one location. That's amazing. Dr. Pike says here, evidence for modern humans in northern Spain dates back to about 41,500 years ago. And before them were Neanderthals. Our results show, and I love where the dates are showing up here, because this is really exciting because it doesn't give a clear picture of who's actually responsible, right? It's sort of right in that in-between region. It's when the modern humans are showing up, and it's when Neanderthals are still there. Our results show that either modern humans arrived with painting already as part of their cultural activity, or developed it very shortly after, perhaps in response to Neanderthals, or perhaps the art is Neanderthal art. Creation of arts by humans is considered an important marker for the evolution of modern cognition, symbolic behavior, and may be associated with the development of language. This is such a great question for our history. Where did language come from? And did it come from art? Because we have examples of art that aren't necessarily language. Like this art is sort of symbolic stuff. It's outlines of hands, it's discs, other things, but it's not picture art. It's not telling a story, or it's not of beasts or showing the hunt, right? So it's sort of creating symbols and being like, wow, look what we did, right? So Dr. Pike says, we see evidence for earlier human symbolism in the form of perforated beads, engraved eggshells, and pigments in Africa 70,000 to 100,000 years ago. But the earliest cave paintings are all in Europe. One argument for its development here is the competition for resources with Neanderthals provoked increased cultural innovation from the earliest groups of modern humans in order to survive. Although it says also here that the alternatively cave painting started before the arrival of modern humans and was done by Neanderthals. But I kind of like instead of competition, because this is still rooted in the idea that modern man and Neanderthal got together and it was this competition for survival. They were competing against each other, when we know now, right? Birds do it, bees do it, Homo sapiens and Neanderthals, right?
Yeah.
Maybe this was the ultimate expression of our coming together, exploded into cave art, right? How awesome would that be? the coming together of modern humans and Neanderthals resulted in art. Huh? That's a little nicer story there, right?
Yeah. That's interesting. It's like an art show, interspecies art show in there.
Yeah.
Exhibition. It's funny because last week we were talking about the out of Africa versus the out of Asia hypotheses, and it sounds like it, as far as cave art goes, that doesn't even matter because they didn't even start doing that until they were in Europe from the oldest specimens we have. That is, unless there are some that were destroyed or we just haven't found yet in Asia or Africa.
Right, and then the out of Asia was the primate, so it would have been the precursor, right, to the more modern versions of humanity. But there's also the red deer caveman now. There's also Denisovian. So there's all these other they're modern for back then. They're pretty modern humanoid out there. But this is really kind of an exciting find to push it back another 10,000 years, because it puts it much closer to being in the Neanderthal camp, which means these hands, right? They've got the sprayed outline of the handprints, hand outlines on these cave walls. Maybe those aren't human, or modern.
Right. I wonder if they can figure it out. If it's a Neanderthal hand or a Homo sapien hand from the shape of it.
Right. It's kind of tough, right? But I think that's, I'm sure they're trying to morphologize the handprints. Maybe they need some. Maybe they need some like kindergartners to go in there and do the same thing and sort of compare.
Right.
How does that compare with the length of fingers that we thought
Right.
modern humans should have versus Neanderthal? And I'm not sure how different those were.
Right. Yeah. The hands might have been almost identical to the point.
Yeah. I
where
don't
you couldn't
know.
It's
I don't know.
difficult to say. I guess that'd be a question for an archaeologist, right? Looking at those fingers and those bones and see if there's really that much of a difference in the structure to where you could figure that out. But I suppose if you could, they would have by now with this information.
Well, yeah, and maybe this is just, but maybe now they're looking at it with the other thing, because it's also a perception thing. If you just assume that's humans, then humans had that size hands, right?
Right.
If you start thinking, well, I wonder if that could be Neanderthal, then you're starting to look, well, from the specimens, the few that we have, thumb to finger ratios were kind of like this, and how does that compare? Now you actually look at it. I mean, we had Neanderthal bones in museums thinking that they were just modern humans, not knowing there was a distinction between that and Neanderthal. We just thought it was different looking humans until years and years pass and our information behind gets filled in more, and then we're like, so like Neanderthals is discovered, and then they discover that they've had Neanderthal bones for like 100 years in a museum. They just didn't know it was a Neanderthal. So it's a new discovery. There's so many discoveries made in museums.
Confusing the scientists over and over. I feel like it's their secret joke way, way in the future is we're going to keep messing with these scientists by looking like humans, but we're not quite humans. We're just going to insert ourselves into weird places.
Yeah, I like this new idea though that the combination of modern Homo sapiens and Neanderthals resulted in art. That's where the first art from. Interspecies love produced the first cave art.
Yeah, if we were mingling in other ways, why not mingle in the arts as well?
Right, and maybe this is what led to the acceleration of language and art and things. It's just, each one of our brains alone would have remained somewhat less intelligent, but somehow the combination, I'm sure there were, a few family offspring that were, the worst case scenario of both, right? But some got where they were really excelling. Their parts of the brain were doing really good, and ours got the other. You never know. But not never, because this is science, and it goes forward. We may know more in the future.
Oh, there's always going to be more. Always.
So awesome.
Yeah. All right. Well, I have a really cool story relating to Father's Day. They have found that children with older fathers and grandfathers live longer. A lot of previous theories have related to older fathers and older parents in general, leading to a lot of complications in pregnancy and potentially leading to problems with the children. But they're finding that actually there's advantage to sperm from an older dad. And that is mainly that telomeres are those little tags on the ends of chromosomes that are repeating segments over and over and over and over. Those telomeres are what protect us as we age, because we lose bits and pieces off of the ends of our chromosomes as we age. And so the longer those repeating nonsense bits are, those telomeres are, we have more time for us to lose bits of our chromosomes before we start to age and essentially die. And so what they found is that older fathers, their sperm have longer telomeres. And then when you have grandfathers that had children when they were old, and then fathers that have children when they're old, then the telomeres are even longer when the grandfather was also old. What they found was actually that the telomeres were getting longer at almost the same rate. Pretty much it was pretty much related to the rate at which the telomeres were getting shorter of the actual man's chromosomes. So it's almost like they were leaving his chromosomes and going into the sperm's chromosomes.
Wow.
Yeah, and so they have admitted, yes, delaying fatherhood increases the risk of miscarriage, but ultimately, longer life, once the offspring is viable, that's a big health benefit. The one thing that they didn't look into yet that now they're going to have to look into is they want to look at kind of the cost benefit relationship between the long telomeres, so a longer lifespan in the child, versus potential DNA damage or mutation in the sperm of an older father. They don't know if that's going to be, completely counteracting the positive effects of the longer telomeres.
Right.
But they found a direct relationship. It was almost 1,800 people that they looked at their sperm.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, what's really interesting too is it's sort of like a self-adjusting system. I mean, everything becomes acceptable risk, because from that sperm's perspective, hey, this pops is 40 years old, so the next generation's got to be able to get at least to 60. Otherwise, or 40 years old, otherwise we won't be able to repopulate. Apparently, that's how long it takes this particular genetic makeup to find a suitable mate. It's going to take at least 40 years. 45 years, 50 years, whatever it is, right? It's going to take at least this long before we get any reproduction happening, right? We need to make sure that next generation sticks around a little bit longer than we were initially planning, because apparently they're late bloomers. I don't know which part of the DNA we blame for that. Apparently we lack the charisma. No, but yeah, no, I mean, that sort of makes sense. So then, even if there is potential risk to the DNA in other ways, the number one main mission is reproduce. Mm-hmm. Stick around long enough to do it. We'll figure out all those little adjustments and those sacrifices we made along the way later on. But make sure that next generation gets here. Wow, that's really interesting.
Yeah, well, the most baffling part of it to me was, and this is the quote from the article, the telomere lengthening seen with each year that the men delayed fatherhood was equal to the yearly shortening of telomere length that occurs in middle-aged adults. That's crazy to me that there's that direct relationship, which I'm sure has to do with what you were just talking about, that while you're losing that, you have to be gaining something else in order to make your existence, I guess, viable.
It's almost as though it's sort of like monitoring the telomeres of the father in order to say, okay, we're going to need this much more for the next generation in order for them to make it to this point. Right? It's like you're adding fuse as you're burning down the candle or something. I don't know how to explain that other than what you said. It makes perfect sense already. Doesn't need that.
Yeah. So old sperm is not bad sperm. That's what we've learned. Yeah.
That's not all we've learned, but that is definitely something to ponder. You
all right, what else you got?
Are outnumbered, by the way, and not just by sperm. You are outnumbered, for there are 10 times as many microbial cells in you as there are human cells that make you up. We know this by now, right? The human microbiome, as scientists call the community of microorganisms that inhabit your skin, mouth, gut, and other crevicy parts of your body in the trillions, plays a fundamental role in keeping you healthy. So we know this, right? Your microbes, they digest food for you. They prevent diseases in a lot of ways. Without them, we would be dead already. Without our microbes running the whole system of our body, basically. The communities that have often been thought to cause disease when they are perturbed, but our microbes' exact function, good, bad, indifferent, poorly understood, very poorly understood. But that lack of understanding could change thanks to religion. No. Thanks to economic think tanks. No, that's not it. Reality TV shows that's thanks to science. Science will find out. National Institutes of Health organized consortium that includes scientists from the U.S. Department of Energy's Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory has for the first time mapped the normal microbial makeup of healthy humans. Which to me already in reading that, I'm kind of like, I thought we were like a diverse multiculture of different microbial makeups, and not everybody's microbial microbiomes was the same. But they found a beneficial makeup. The research will help scientists understand how our microbiome carries out vital tasks such as supporting our immune system, helping us digest food, etc. It's also going to shed some light on how microbes are involved with disease. And most likely, I think what we're going to be discovering is certain microorganisms within us are susceptible to being hijacked by things like viruses or other microbes. So they're also going to look very closely at Crohn's disease and psoriasis, to name just a few of the things that they're focused on in this. In several scientific reports published June 14th in Nature and Journals in the Public Library of Science, about 200 members of the Human Microbiome Project, the HMP, from nearly 80 research institutions report on 5 years of research. They've got 3.5 terabases of data. What's a terabase of data? Is that big? That's apparently is very big. Is that like a petaflop? Is it more? Teras, it's less than a, okay. Well, 3.5 terabases, that sounds like a big number of data were acquired in this. The researchers sampled 242 healthy U.S. volunteers, collecting tissues from 15 body sites in men and 18 sites in women. I did not realize women had more body sites than, maybe I did. Researchers collected up to three samples from each volunteer at sites such as the mouth, nose, skin, and lower intestine. The microbial communities in each body site can be as different as the microbes in the Amazon rainforest versus the Sahara Desert. You're a whole planet of terrains and regions and areas. Just you and yourself. You have different cultures of bacteria that inhabit different parts of your body that are completely different from those that are inhabiting other parts of your body.
Yay!
You are an ecosystem, Blair.
That's very exciting.
Isn't that kind of cool?
I'm glad I can help all those little beings. By the way, a terabase is an amount of genetic sequence data equivalent to 10 to the 12th power base pairs.
Oh, that's a lot.
That's a lot.
That's a lot of information. Let's see. Berkeley scientists developed and maintained a comparative analysis system called the Integrated Microbial Genomes and Metagenomes for the Human Microbiome Project. It allows scientists to study the human microbiome samples within the context of reference genomes of individual microbes. Interesting. This system is a data mart of a larger warehouse that supports the analysis of microbial communities. So what they're trying to do is be able to isolate how individual microbes, if they were removed, if other ones are placed in, how that sort of would change the ecosystem of your microbiome. Our system enables scientists worldwide to access and analyze the metagenome data sets generated by NIH's Human Microbiome Project. We plan to add our system metagenome data sets generated by similar projects in Europe, Canada, and Asia. So at some point we can put all of our microbes together. Aww. And what's next? They say now we have a good idea of what makes up a healthy human microbiome. We can study what happens when it is perturbed because of disease, drugs, or diet. In their lab, for example, scientists studied the role of the gut microbiome in Crohn's disease, which is an inflammatory bowel disease. Changes in the composition or function of the trillions of microbes inhabiting the human intestine are associated with the Crohn's disease. Understanding these factors underlying these changes will help researchers develop microbial therapies to fight these diseases. Very cool. Planet Me!
It's so cool. I mean, I'm really interested in space and planets and all of this stuff, but when it comes down to it, I guess it's because I'm a biologist, but I just think there's so much cool stuff to check out on our planet. Like, this is just proof of that there's all these different microorganisms and essentially niches and environments inside our own body that we don't even know that much about yet.
See, yeah,
it's
I'm not
astonishing to me.
I'm not even interested in the planet anymore, right? I'm just interested in me. I'm my own. Like, yeah, there's a whole solar system. Sure, there's this whole planet, but I'm my own ecosystem. How rad is that?
Yeah,
that's all I need.
Sweet. All right. Well, if you just tuned in, you're listening to This Week in Science, and I think it's time
Is it?
for my Animal Corner.
There's Animal Corner. Blair works in a zoo, likes hippos, isn't fond of pandas.
No, it's true. We're learning things about my likes and dislikes in the animal kingdom. Anyway, this week in the Animal Corner, I have a story about bats. And I know there's a couple people that have been asking me to talk about bats for weeks and weeks. But this time I actually found something very interesting coming out of a new study in South America on bats, on vampire bats. Apparently, vampire bats are responsible for the spread of rabies in South America, or at least that's what they think, is that these vampire bats are responsible. And it makes sense because they can spread rabies very easily because they're sucking blood from other animals, and then they might bite a human, and it brings the rabies to us very easily. So it stands to reason that if you reduce the population of vampire bats, potentially you could reduce the spread of rabies. Well, they found out that maybe that's not the case. They looked at, a 40-month period from 20 sampling sites of colonies of these vampire bats. And essentially what they found was there's rabies whether you cull the populations or not. The size of the bat colony did not predict the proportion of bats that were exposed to rabies. So there was no relationship between bat population density and the spread of the virus. And so for over 30 years now, they've been culling these vampire bats in South America, and specifically there's just been a big push to do it in Peru because they've been infecting livestock or humans. And what they found was that areas that were sporadically culled actually had an increase in the proportion of bats exposed to rabies. Colonies that were frequently culled had a slightly lower rate, but the ones that had never been culled at all had the lowest rates of all of them.
Don't mess with nature, people. It knows what it's doing.
It's the same lesson we have to learn over and over again. And really, it just looks like it's one of those situations where humans are going into areas they're not supposed to be in. When they're encroaching on these areas where there are vampire bat colonies and they're raising livestock that aren't native, the livestock and us, we're getting bit and we're getting rabies. And so really, there's not a lot we can do. We don't want to get rid of bats. We don't want to mess up the ecosystem or the food web. We don't want to get rabies either. Maybe we should just be sending vaccines down there. Just saying.
Giving little tiny shots to the bats.
No, to the humans.
Oh, them. Yeah. Okay.
Give them rabies titer. They're fine.
That's who we're worried about. Yeah.
Yeah. So
pop quiz. What living animal is the bat most closely related to that you might not suspect?
I don't know.
What's their closest living cousin, genetically speaking?
Do you know the answer? Are you quizzing me?
I do.
Oh, I don't know what it is. I don't know a lot about bats.
They're closely related to the horses.
Really?
It's not rats. Most people think that they're somehow
I know it's not. They're not
mouse or
rodents,
rat
for
because
sure.
of the ears or the size or something, but they're closer related to the horse.
That's very
it's
interesting.
back in
It's a
some
pretty
sort of...
long convergence, though.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of convergitating going on between those two creatures, but still they're closer related to a horse than they are a rat. I think that's the
Yeah. So long story short, maybe we shouldn't cull populations that are native to areas that we're not. Just a thought. But yeah, I mean, if the rabies vaccine, it is a very expensive vaccine, even in the United States. Even if I wanted to go get a rabies vaccine, I think it's over $1,000. So I can understand how that'd be very hard to bring down into South America and just give to everybody. But maybe it should be looked into to get that vaccine to be a little more affordable. Maybe if it was being mass produced and sent out to South America, it wouldn't be so expensive.
Yeah, I guess it probably isn't being produced and fantastic because I don't think everybody here is getting vaccinated from it because, I mean, I've never been bitten by a bat, or a horse for that matter.
Well, and if you were bitten, you wouldn't be getting the vaccine. You would have to get a round of a completely different rabies treatment, which is horrific. I think it's something like 12 shots. It's insane.
I think they've gotten, maybe I'm wrong about this, but I think they've gotten it down because it used to be like a dozen stomach shots and it was all brutal. I think they've gotten it figured out so it's not so horrible.
It's still pretty traumatizing, but I think now if you get the vaccine and then you keep it up with your rabies titer, you just have to go get a booster if you get bit, and it's not such a big deal at all.
So don't get bit by bats or horses or horses dressed as bats.
Right. Yes.
So, hey, I think we are at about the good time for the break. You've been listening, watching, pondering This Week in Science. We'll be right back after this stuff.
TWiS would like to thank Audible.com for sponsoring this episode of This Week in Science. Audible.com is the leading provider of audiobooks with over 75,000 different titles in a variety of genres. TWiS has found many science-based books in the Audible library. You can start a free trial today and get any audiobook download for free. All you have to do is sign up at audiblepodcast.com/TWiS. Go to audiblepodcast.com/TWIS now for your free download. TWiS also has merchandise you might enjoy. Head over to twis.org to purchase our 2010 Science Music Compilation CD. Yes, that's a CD, and a World Robot Domination t-shirt. TWiS is supported by listeners like you. Your donations pay for our hosting, bandwidth, contractors we need to hire, and fun things we try to do for the show. We appreciate any amount. $2, $5, $10, even $100. You make this show possible. We accept donations through PayPal and have made the process easy by putting donation buttons on each show page on our website, www.twis.org. So go to the website, listen to the most recent episode, comment on the show, and make a donation. We thank you for your support. We couldn't do it without you.
Lie somewhere within this scattered plot. Our first assumptions were correct. Disprove the rest. It's hard. The methods of hypothesis and patience are the only things I need. Put on a pair of goggles and go looking for the things I couldn't see.
And we're back with more This Week in Science. What you got, Blair?
I have a story about cane toads, also known as marine toads. They're an invasive species in Australia. They have kind of this long story, but they're from South America. They were brought to Hawaii and to Florida to eat some of these bugs that were eating the sugarcane plant that was being farmed there. And it worked really well in Hawaii and in Florida, so they decided to bring them to Australia. Well, they didn't really do their research beforehand because cane toads are famous for having a poison gland on the back of their head, up by their neck. It's called a parotid gland, and it secretes a milky poison, and it causes paralysis or death in a lot of predators. Now, in South America, where they're from, they're animals that are immune to the poison, so they can
evolved
predate
together.
on
Yeah,
the
they've
toads.
already got the counter evolution to that poison, so it does maybe give them a bad taste, but it doesn't kill them.
Right, exactly. And so their population gets controlled there. And luckily, they had some sort of population control just by happenstance in Hawaii and in Florida. So their population didn't run out of control. But in Australia, there was nothing, and they're everywhere. And now they're this pest and this huge problem.
And they have actually an event where they go cane bashing, where
Right,
they encourage the population to go out there with golf clubs and baseball bats and the whole rest of it. And I don't know, maybe there's bounties on the number or contests to see who can get the most cane toads.
Yeah, and actually we have that here too. We have an invasive species. The bullfrog is invasive here, and it's targeting a lot of our Pacific pond turtles, actually.
That's
But a whole other
invasive?
story.
The bullfrog
Yep.
is invasive? I didn't know that.
Yep. Yeah, and people will go out killing the bullfrogs too to try to protect the turtles. But anyway,
Now suddenly I don't feel so bad about the ill-gotten days spent with a BB gun in my youth. I feel a little...
yeah, you were helping population control, right?
I was
so-
borderline heading into being a psychopath. I'm not sure. It was very... I did regret
Let's
it
just say
afterwards.
You were working for science.
I was doing science at 7 with a BB gun.
Yeah. Yep.
Rad.
So the cane toads, they've been trying to get rid of these guys for years and years. But part of the problem is that a single amount of eggs that they lay at one time can be up to 30,000 eggs. Also, where they're from, there's lots of predators in the water that are used to eating these tadpoles, and they can help cull the herd before they even develop into frogs, or toads, rather. And so they don't have that population control there either. Well, what they've found is that they can use their own poison against them by luring them into traps with the poison.
Huh.
I don't know how they figured this out. It sounds like originally they had put a whole dead toad into a funnel trap, and tadpoles just came rushing in. So then they took some of just the poison and put that in the funnel trap. The poison in the funnel trap does not attract any native insects or fish. So that's great. And now they're looking to do something with the poison where they can just take the part of it out that the tadpoles are responding to, so it's not dangerous to other animals anymore if they were to touch it. Like right now they're trying to get this poison to put it in the funnel traps, and they have to be really careful because if any animal were to touch that poison, it could be a big deal. It could cause, like I said, paralysis or even death. So they have to have this super intricate method of extracting the poison and putting it in these traps. But they're looking at just taking the one part out that the tadpoles are responding to and lining these traps with that. And they even said that one of the ponds that they put this funnel trap in, not a single toad emerged after all of the tadpoles were in the water. So it was pretty effective.
Whoa.
It would be great if we could get this huge invasive species out of Australia. That would be this amazing advance for Australian wildlife. It would be great.
It could be, or it could be the destruction of Australian society as we know it. I mean,
Why is that?
Well, if they don't have cane toads to bash, they may turn on each other.
Oh.
Just saying.
Well, they have lots of other animals that they demonize in Australia. Like
exactly. As long as they're focused on the cane toad.
Not to mention dingoes are invasive.
Wait,
They have
the
lots of
dingo?
invasive
The dingo's invasive? That's not a native?
Yeah, they've been there a very long time, but they originally came from somewhere else. I want to say Asia? I don't know.
Oh,
I
that
bet the chat
kinda-
room will tell me.
Yeah. Okay.
And they do have rabbits, too. That's true. They have invasive rabbits. Australia has all sorts of invasive stuff. The sheep aren't supposed to be there.
Well,
Although
wait a second. Wait, if you get there's a certain point though when you're left with Tasmanian devils, kangaroos, and penguins, right? I mean
There's some other stuff too. There's more than that.
I mean, and crocs, right?
There's kiwis.
Kiwis, yeah.
Mhm.
Koalas,
Finches.
other
of course.
marsupial type things.
Wombats.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So yeah. Anyway, that'd be amazing if suddenly our huge mistake with the cane toads could be reversed.
That could be that. Yeah, no, absolutely. Wayne, what an amazing trick of nature too. That the poison that's so effective is comes from the toad itself. That's sort of.
Oh, it almost sounds devious.
Well, we humans are quite devious creatures. We really are.
Yeah.
We are the most devious. Actually, this is the story that I didn't bring and we didn't get printed out. But they decoded the genome of the bonobo. And the only thing I really remember I took away from it that I thought was very interesting is a statement that about 3 to 4% of our DNA is, on one hand, more closely related to chimpanzee than, and on the other, more closely related to bonobo, but that they don't share as much of a genetic link to each other. Like we're closer related to both a bonobo and a chimpanzee than chimpanzees and bonobos are to each other, which is pretty interesting.
I thought they were directly related. I thought they were close cousins.
Yeah. They have I guess more significant differences between them than I guess they have some pretty significant differences between them. They may actually be closer related, but I guess the takeaway was that we have about 3 to 4% of our DNA is closely related to a chimpanzee, and another 3 to 4% is closely related to a bonobo. But those are two things that don't overlap between them.
Oh, they don't have the same 3 to 4%.
Right.
Between them. I see what you're saying.
Yeah. So it's not that we're it's not that we're closer related to bonobos and chimps than they are to each other, but that there are areas in which we overlap with one or the other, but not both. And to a pretty good degree, that's sort of a fascinating. So what it does though is it starts to paint the picture going backwards to the family tree of where we sort of separated as a group, right? Mm-hmm. Kind of interesting. It's more of this origin story. Although I'm less interested in the early days. It's gaining fascination for me, but I'm still very much. I'm much more fascinated with a little bit more recent stuff. Here's something that's very recent. An unusual form of vitamin B in high enough doses makes mice leaner, faster, and stronger. So this otherwise undiscovered form of vitamin B3 is found, at this point, it looks like only in milk and in very small quantities, yet produces remarkable health benefits in mice when high doses are administered, according to this study conducted by researchers at Weill Cornell Medical College and the Polytechnic School in Lausanne, Switzerland. Findings were reported in the June issue of the journal Cell Metabolism, revealed that high doses of this vitamin precursor, nicotinamide riboside, or NR, which is a cousin of niacin, prevent obesity in mice that are fed a fatty diet, and also increase muscle performance, improve energy expenditure, and prevent diabetes development without any noticeable side effects in these mice. So, Swiss researchers led by Johann Auerx performed the mouse experiments. While the ability to give the animal sufficient doses of the NR was made possible by a researcher from the Weill Cornell Medical College, the study is very important. It shows that in animals, the use of NR offers the health benefits of a low-calorie diet and exercise without having a low-calorie diet or exercising, says Dr. Anthony Suave, Associate Professor of Pharmacology at Weill Cornell Medical College and an apparently ardent anti-exercise activist. So he invented this method of synthesizing this NR, this nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide, or NR, to increase that, which then in turn increases the nicotiniamide adenine dinucleotide, or NAD. So the NR increases the NAD levels in human cells, which NAD is a central component of energy metabolism. It's kind of an interesting thing. So they've done this in mice. They don't know what the effects will be if they were to upscale to humans. But yeah, creating mighty mice through stimulating the NR, stimulating levels of NAD in mammalian cells. And what NAD actually does, it allows sugars, fats, and proteins to be converted into energy. It's the sort of component that actually is the engine, I guess, where the things get the conversion into work, into energy for the body. Dr. Schwab's research provided the first evidence that NR enhances NAD levels in mitochondria in mammalian cells and culture. Then they've gone on to do this mouse story. I mean, I don't know. This could actually have a lot of interesting benefits, being able to increase metabolism and the energy ability to intake energy. It means we could actually survive with less nutrients being used because we'd be using them more efficiently. What they did was, though, they gave two groups of mice, some treated, some untreated, this sort of high-fat diet. Some were supplemented with the NR, some weren't. Those that were supplemented had 60% less weight gain than mice fed the diet without it. They didn't eat more. This is very key to point out. They weren't eating more or less. It wasn't an appetite suppressant. They ate more but gained less weight, and apparently they were converting it not into stored energy but into active energy. They were in better shape physically than the untreated mice, and had significantly better endurance and stronger muscles.
Okay, wait, but you say they were converting it into active energy. That's what you just said,
well,
right?
I'm assuming that's as opposed to, because stored energy is fat, right? I mean, it's the energy itself is still there, but it's whether or not it's being converted into energy to run around with, or or muscle tissue.
So were these mice running around more than the mice that weren't given the supplement?
Yes.
So they were just more likely to just exercise in general then. They were just more motivated to move around. So even if humans were given this supplement, if they still sat around on the couch, it probably wouldn't do anything. In fact, it might even make you gain more weight because you're synthesizing the food more effectively.
Well, I don't know, because I think it gave them the energy to not want to sit on the couch. I don't know. I mean, they don't have TV, so they don't have a motivation to sit in one place.
Up in the brain. That's all I'm saying. Is the pull from the television might be enough that it might not make the average person get up and exercise if they weren't going to exercise. This might be really effective for people that have that kind of lifestyle anyway, that they're an active person. Maybe this would be really great for that. But if you're not an active person anyway, it would be interesting to see if it actually changed your attitude and your behavior or not.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Also, none of the treated mice developed diabetes, which was seen to occur in those on the high-fat diet. When they were fed in a separate sort of experiment, a normal diet, treated mice had improved sensitivity to insulin. They also showed lower cholesterol levels, which I think is weird because I think with the muscle gain, you would expect higher cholesterol levels, not lower. And all of these benefits came without any significant noticeable toxicity or, negative cognitive function as reported by the mice.
That's interesting. And you said that this vitamin B comes from milk now, naturally?
Yep. It's in milk. But it's in very, very tiny
quantities.
quantities. Yeah, tiny quantities that shouldn't have any sort of noticeable effect on humans. Drinking lots of milk wouldn't really do it, but they sort of noticed that it was present. This is where it was discovered. It was discovered in milk, and then they synthesized it into great quantities to see what it would do on a larger scale. And it created NAD augmentation.
Well, if it's really just vitamin B,
It's a vitamin
that
B3
doesn't sound like
that's
something-
like, but it's a unique kind of the vitamin B3. So it's not something that is currently. It's discovered naturally here in the milk, and they've synthesized a version of it now, but it's not anything that's in your vitamin cabinet at the moment.
right? But I'm just saying it's not some weird synthetic compound that we've never heard of before. It's just a form of vitamin B,
Right.
which in a way might actually get it to market a lot faster than some, quote unquote diet pill.
Oh yeah, absolutely, and plus you don't have to exercise. So,
Well, it sounds like you still have to exercise. In fact, the exercise is the most important part of the new supplement.
because it's kind of a funny thing because right on the one hand it says that it gives more energy, which you assume means they're more active, but
Right.
it also says it's without exercise they still showed less weight gain. So I'm not sure how to justify those two in this study.
If you're consuming calories, it has to go somewhere.
Oh, and that was somebody brought up there was a photo of a cow that was brought up. Why would you assume that it was milk from cows? Yeah. It's milk. It's milk. Not
Well, because they were
necessarily from
talking
a
about
cow.
milk that you drink as a human. They were saying it was in there, right?
You know what?
So-
It just says milk. I actually assumed
okay.
breast milk and didn't think twice about it until you brought up that picture of the cow, and I was like, well, I don't know why they would assume it would come from a cow breast and not a human one.
It's called an udder. I assumed
It's a
that-
breast. It's a mammals have breasts. It's not the most attractive breast in the animal kingdom, but it's a breast.
Human anatomy has different words than animal anatomy, or we call physiology, right? It's different. Anyway, we don't need to get into that. It's a whole nother conversation. All right, speaking of magic pills, I have a story about a pill that could give you courage. Duke University and the National Institute of Health recently developed a drug that calms anxious mice. Fatty acid hydrolase, or FAAH, is a gene encoding enzyme that has a similar anxiety-reducing effect on the brain to marijuana. And they found that essentially it reduces a fear response in these mice. And not only does it reduce the fear response, but it shortens the period in between being fearful and being restful. And so what they're looking at now is how to synthesize this for humans. They don't necessarily want to make a courage pill, although that could be down the line where we could, in theory, if you take this way down the line, we could eliminate fear, which I don't know if that's a good thing.
Sounds
Some
like a
people
bad.
might say
It sounds like that would end badly.
Well, it might reduce the population problem a little bit if there's no fear. But they're really looking at it now for anxiety disorders, specifically PTSD. If they can do what FAAH does in your brain with this drug, it could potentially greatly reduce the effect of anxiety disorders in humans. But so far, it's just mice.
But I do my best thinking out of anxiety.
I know. Anxiety kind of runs my life in
Yeah.
a lot of ways. Not every day, but I think it's part of using your brain a lot. You're always thinking 4 steps ahead, and you're thinking about all your different outcomes and good and bad outcomes, and that builds on anxiety, and then you're thinking it leads you to make smart decisions when perhaps you wouldn't.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree with that.
There's a saying about having a healthy sense of fear, and without that, I could potentially see a lot of stupid decisions being made by the human race.
Absolutely. On the other hand, if everybody took it right around election time, it would a lot of the campaign commercials from name your political party would be less effective.
That's true. What was really interesting to me was that they were all putting this down, narrowing it down to the function of this fatty acid hydrolase. And multiple times in the article, they said that this enzyme breaks down what's called a natural endocannabinoid chemical in the brain, which is what happens when your brain processes cannabis. If that's really the problem here, why are they not just trying marijuana on these mice? That's my question.
And it seems to me like marijuana wouldn't be a good anti-anxiety. I mean, I don't know from an extensive past personal experience, but it seems to me I always get paranoid when stoned.
Well, I think paranoia
which
and
increases anxiety.
They could be different, because if you weren't worried about, like, okay, if marijuana was legal and you weren't afraid of getting caught doing it, isn't that a big part of that paranoia?
Not at all. Not for me. Not to me. That's never ever even entered my mind. Oh my God, what a buzzkill. Cops, man. That's gonna freak me out now. But no, I was thinking more like that pilot light, like that's really freaky. Like should that always be on? Is that supposed to be on? I just noticed it. Like, is it always burning like that? Like, is it supposed to be turned off at some point? Or if we blow it out, what happens? But there's all sorts of like anxiety thoughts stuff that that comes along with that.
That's
so it's just sort of weird that it's a cannabinoid, but it seemingly has, I think, maybe these things affect different people different ways though.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess maybe there's something else going on that's causing the paranoia, or maybe it's too much. Maybe there's a specific amount that gives you the exact right anti-anxiety effect. I don't know.
This
but
requires some experimentation.
That in some people, in some cases, I will say, marijuana can reduce anxiety, just because you don't tend to, I guess, focus in on certain things as much as you would.
Or more so. See, this is the thing. It's a psychedelic, so it affects people's minds totally differently. I had a very good friend who, and this is a long time ago, and don't try this at home, who used to be able to smoke marijuana and then do a what do you call it? BMX. He would do competition BMX riding.
Oh gosh.
And he could just handle it, I couldn't. I don't smoke the weed. I don't smoke the marijuana myself, because all it did was increase gravity, like a magnitude. That's all it did. That's the only real effect marijuana ever had to me, was it like a magnitude of gravity. So I was just be like.
I think it depends very intensely from person to person, and I don't know if also we could bring this right back to this whole gene encoding enzyme idea of maybe if you have that enzyme not functioning properly, then you maybe smoke some marijuana. Maybe that would compensate for that. But if you have a perfectly good functioning enzyme, maybe it's too much for you. I don't know.
I was just always nervous that it was bringing to the surface some otherwise hidden psychoses that I would prefer not to acknowledge existed. So.
It is interesting though, because I do know that anxiety patients do sometimes get prescribed medicinal marijuana. So I think it would be interesting to take these same mice that they call anxious mice and see if they had a similar reaction to cannabis as they did to this drug that they gave them.
It's also, this is one of the problems sometimes in research that is done on mice, is that a lot of times the genetic pool of these mice, because they want to be able to repeat the results within all of the mice, they're so genetically similar, these mice, that there's not a lot of variation in the population that the experiment's happening on, whereas you get to a human population where we're much more diverse than a lab rat, each one of us, you'll see a lot more effects or different sort of things going on there.
Right. So anyway,
Interesting.
anti-fear pill soon in your future, potentially.
This is a very bizarre. Wow. I'm just gonna read this. 10-year NIH-funded study determined that a third of infants who have suffered from prolonged seizures and fever suffer either from a new or reactivated roseola virus infection. So roseola viruses are the cause of the common childhood rash. Can also cause limbic encephalitis, condition that frequently progresses into epilepsy. This is, wow. A third of these cases can now be linked to a virus infection. The study strengthened the link between HHV6B, which is a human herpes virus of the blood. 32% of the 169 infants with the prolonged seizures, a condition known as encephalitis, had this virus present. That is so wild.
And what does this virus do? Is it in the brain?
Yeah.
Or nervous cells?
The viruses persist in the brain cells and can be activated during periods of immunosuppression or stress.
Well, then that makes sense. I mean, it's your nerve center is in there, right? So that could definitely affect that could cause seizures if they're messing with your circuitry.
Yeah, it says here, it is possible that these patients harbor latent viruses in the brain tissue that reactivates later in response to unknown triggers, possibly later emerging as full-blown epilepsy from a virus. What? Yeah, currently infants with seizures aren't tested for the viruses. And treatment can consist, though, of consists of anti-seizure drugs. However, the author expects clinical trials to be established as soon as more evidence is gathered. Transplant patients suffering from seizures from HHV6 reactivation are routinely treated with antivirals. And antiviral treatment is now common practice for symptomatic infants infected with a similar virus. That is infants who contract CMV, which is cytomegalovirus, from their mothers during pregnancy or shortly following birth, can develop seizures and mental retardation, as well as permanent loss in both hearing and vision. Antiviral therapy reduces neurological complications and seizures in these infants. So, wow, this is like a whole, could epilepsy be a latent virus that's getting re-triggered when the immune system is compromised in times of stress? That's I had no inkling that was coming.
Well, a third, it doesn't mean they're all that, but it's something to look at now.
Well, yeah, if you eliminate a third of them with one virus, right? We may, that doesn't, that leaves you down to 2/3 of that you got to figure out what the cause is. Chances are it's probably going to be something else closely related to how these viruses are interacting with the brain then.
I would be interested to see if they pre-screened babies for this viral infection, what percentage of babies carrying the virus then developed seizures. That's what I'd be really interested about. If it was a really high percentage, basically if you have this viral infection, you will start to get seizures. That'd be a really good thing to know.
Now you're going to make me read the whole study.
Sorry. You can get back to me later. It's fine.
Okay, I'll get back to you next week. Last story. I don't have time to do this one. My last story. A group of Japanese scientists have surprised themselves. Oh, that was it.
Well, now I'm curious.
Well, this is actually. So by being able, they've surprised themselves apparently by being able to predict the success or failure of blockbuster movies at the box office using a set of mathematical models. Well, that would be really fascinating, right? Oh, we got a set of mathematical models, an algorithm that will predict the success of a movie. Is it based on the script? Is it based on the cast, who the director is? Is it some sort of a rating system based on past performance of those and future, indicating future performance? And is it something along that nature? No. What they did is they went and looked at how much the movies are being talked about in blogs.
Of course.
How much advertising is being done for the movies. How many times they're showing up in different public forums of conversation. And that's how they used their mathematical algorithm to discover the success of a box office hit or the bust is based on how much buzz a movie has, which is after the fact, and that's usually comes along with the success. That
is kind of a
surprise,
obvious
surprise, as one Gomerith-esque pile might say. You got anything? Any other stories sitting there?
I have a real quick one about pitcher plants. So they're a carnivorous plant. Unlike the Venus flytrap with moving parts, they're basically just a pitcher with a liquid on the inside that eats up bugs and arachnids, dissolves them, and then the plant can use the nutrients from their prey. They have kind of this little, I would almost describe it as an awning over the top of the pitcher, and a lot of insects and arachnids will use that to climb right under. They'll use it as a kind of a walkway. And what they found is that pitcher plants can actually use rain to help them trap prey. When it's raining, prey will walk on the underside of the awning to avoid the water, but there's kind of a waxy cover on the bottom of that awning, and they can grip when it's dry, but when it's wet and a droplet of rain hits the top of the awning, it makes it vibrate, they lose their footing, and they fall in to their demise.
Awesome
Smart
pitcher
carnivorous plant.
That's totally cool.
Yeah.
I think we've reached the end. Hey, thank you, everybody, for listening. We hope you enjoyed the show. Special thanks to the TWiS studio for engineering us with tremendous hospitality each week now. And, you all deserve a bigger round of applause than we have time for. Also, thank you, KTVS 90.3 in Davis, for keeping us a real deal radio broadcast. TWiS is available as a podcast. Just search for This Week in Science in the iTunes directory, or if you have an Android device, you can look up TWiS for Droid. That's TWIS, the number 4, Droid app in your Android marketplace.
For more information on anything you've heard here today, show notes will be available on our website, www.twis.org. We also want to hear from you, so email us at kirsten@thisweekinscience.com or justin@thisweekinscience.com.
You can also contact us, follow us there on the Twitter, at Dr. Kiki, or at JacksonFly, or at TWiS Science, or at Blair's Menagerie.
Yay!
We love your feedback. If there's a topic you'd like us to cover or address, suggestion for an interview, a haiku that occurred to you in a dream that you just must share, please let us know.
We'll be back here next week, and we hope you'll join us again for some more great science news.
And if you've learned anything from today's show, remember,
it's all in your head.
This week in science. This week in science. This week in science. This week in science, it's the end of the world. So I'm setting up shop, got my banner unfurled. It says the scientist is in, I'm gonna sell my advice. Show them how to stop the robots with a simple device. I'll reverse global warming with a wave of my hand. And all it'll cost you is a couple of grand. 'Cause this week's science is coming your way. So everybody listen to what I say. I use the scientific method for all that it's worth, and I'll broadcast my opinion all over the earth. 'Cause it's This Week in Science, This Week in Science, This week in science, science, science. This week in science, this week in science. This week in science, 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 science. I've got one disclaimer and it shouldn't be news. That what I say may not represent your views, but I've done the calculations and I've got a plan. If you listen to the science, you may just yet understand that we're not trying to threaten your philosophy. We're just trying to save the world from jeopardy. Jeopardy, jeopardy. And this week in science is coming your way. So everybody listen to everything we say. And if you use our method instead of rolling a die, we may rid the world of toxoplasma gondii. Cause it's this week in science. This week in science. This week in science. 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 This week in science. This week in science. This week in science. 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 Got a laundry list of items I want to address. From stopping global hunger to dredging Loch Ness. I'm trying to promote more rational thought, and I'll try to answer any question you got. But how can I ever see the changes I seek when I can only set up shop 1 hour a week? This week in science is coming your way. You better just listen to what we say. And if you've learned anything from the words that we've said, then please just remember it's all in your head. Cause it's this week in science. This week in science. This week in science. 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 This week in science. This week in science. This week in science. 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 This week in 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 science.